coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. I am Kadria Ahmed.
It seems that there is a consensus today. There is a consensus. If you take it much broadly, the North, so-called North, if you calculate the number of years they were in power, but essentially, poverty is still predominantly a northern phenomenon. So, that you control this and a few billionaires are made here and there and so on and so forth means absolute nothing. The ordinary man in Nigeria has not benefited, is getting worse off by the current system that we have. But there is a consensus now on restructuring. And in that case, Fodile would argue that Biafra becomes a metaphor for agitation by oppressed people for justice, equity, and fairness.
Today, we are talking Biafra and nation building and asking the question raised in that video at a public lecture by the former CBN governor, Mr. Charles Chukwuma Soludo. Why? Well, because 50 years after Nigeria fought a bloody civil war to prevent secession by the breakaway Republic of Biafra, there is now renewed agitation for the state by the group called the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, led by Nnamdi Kanu. He was arrested and charged with treason as a result of his campaign, which included a call for donations so his group can buy guns and bullets to, as he put it, fight Nigeria. And he was held for quite a while, but he is now out on bail. And a little bit later in the program, we will hear from him directly. But since his release, tension has escalated following a successful call by his group for a sit-down-at-home campaign on the 50th anniversary of the declaration of Biafra. A coalition of youth groups from northern Nigeria have reacted to these events by giving an ultimatum to Igbos to vacate northern Nigeria by October and return to the east to, as they put it, actualize Biafra. That call has been widely condemned, with many recommending that the leaders of the group should be arrested and charged with incitement. Now, disturbed by the impact of all of this on the nation, the acting president, Professor Yomi Oshibanjo, has held several meetings with leaders across the country to douse tension. On the call today, we ask, why does Biafra continue to resonate half a century after the Civil War? And what, if any, link is there between the war and the current agitation? We examine that agitation and see whether it is a drive for geographical independence or more a symbolic manifestation of the need for self-determination within a loose federation. We will also try and see if we can reach a resolution here in the studio on what way Nigeria should go. Now, to join me in having this conversation, I'm very blessed to have with me in the studio Professor Chide Odunkalu, who is the President General of the Unity Schools Association, former students of the Unity Association. So welcome, sir, to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Next to him is Mr. Celestine I'm so sorry. Akpobara, who is an environmentalist and also an Ogboni activist. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I am also joined by Mr. Odia Ofemun, who is a writer and former private secretary to Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Last but not least is Dr. Jibrin Ibrahim, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development. I'm also joined by a distinguished audience, and we will be inviting them to take part in the discussions as we go along. Let me start with you, Mr. Ofemun, by asking, why does Biafra resonate 50 years after Nigeria fought a civil war?
Because Nigeria became independent and could not design a just system of sharing the loot of freedom. And in the course of trying to settle it, we got it all wrong. It is important that in discussing Biafra, we remember that between 1958 and 1960, there were only 3 political parties that could take government. But none of them could take government on the strength of just what they had. They had to form a coalition. The best coalition in Nigeria was supposed to be between the NCNC, the Action Group, the NEPU, the UMBC.
Now, for the benefit of our audience, who you know, because Nigeria there's no history. They don't teach history in school, so you need to explain
yes,
who these parties are.
Exactly. NCNC, the National
so
Council, the National Council for Nigeria and the Cameroons.
Yes.
The Action Group.
Right. And these were regional parties?
These were the regional parties.
Okay.
Well, they were supposed to be the national parties, but because they were all based in the regions, they tried only from their regions to reach out to the rest of the country. Even when they attempted to move beyond their regions, they were hemmed in by the regionalization that had already taken place. And so you needed for the northern the NPC in the north, the NCNC in the east, and the Action Group in the west to form a proper coalition. No proper coalition could be formed because there were too many disagreements, and this was the basis of the disagreement. The NCNC was told that if a proper coalition was formed between it, the Action Group, and the other political parties, there will be too much tension between Easterners and Westerners because they had too many educated people to take over the jobs that were being vacated by the existing colonials.
Okay, now I don't want to interrupt the history lesson because, you know, we could do with it. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time. But the question is this. I can see why that might have led to the problems which then led to the Civil War. My question, though, is that the Civil War was fought, and we had some sort of agreement on how to move forward. And yet here we are 50 years on. We are still talking about it. And some people are saying we still want Biafra. And my question is why?
Just give me a minute. When I have explained it, you will see that the injustice with which we started took us into the Civil War. And we came out of the Civil War with that injustice still very present. It was after the sharing of the loot of independence was badly done, the jobs went to the east, but the north took over the Kanji Dam, the railway extensions, the military installations, the iron and steel industry. It was at that point in 1964 that an election took place, and the president of the Republic, Nnamdi Azikiwe, refused to call the prime minister to form a government. That was when the first military intervention in Nigeria took place, because the prime minister ordered the military to put the president in what we will agree today was a custody.
Okay, let me bring in Professor Chidi Odinkalu. What he seems to be saying is that the foundation was wrong. Does that resonate? Do you accept that? Or do you see it slightly differently?
Look, you can negotiate your foundations however you want. I start from the basis that no country is a fact of nature. Every country is built. That means you have to work with some foundations. Some foundations are stronger than others. Some foundations are given. And you can look at a lot of African countries. I'll give you one example. Tanzania. Okay? Now, Tanzania is a fusion of two territories. So that's why it's called United Republic of Tanzania. Because you've got Tanganyika and you have Zanzibar. And actually, Zanzibar is also 2 territories, 2 islands. And what happened? There was one person, Julius Nyerere. And Tanzania, by the way, has got as much pluralism to some extent as Nigeria. Tens of ethnicities and tribes. Muslims make over 40% of Tanzania. Julius Nyerere, as a Catholic, was actually a minority in Tanzania. But he did what? He tried to build a country. He tried to forge a country. And now you look at the Great Lakes of Africa, and you see Kenya. In Kenya, the language is what? Majimbo. Majimbo is what? Carve up the entire place. Break up the country. You look at Burundi. You look at Rwanda. You look at DRC. You go to Eritrea. You go to Ethiopia. All around Tanzania. Tanzania is an oasis of stability. Why? Because there was one person who was prepared to build a country out of difficult foundations. And what's the point I'm trying to make? I don't think our foundations, no matter how flawed, are reason enough for where we are. We've got to take responsibility. We've produced, forgive my expression, crap leadership.
Crap leadership, Dr. Ibrahim, explains why we are here still talking about parts of Nigeria that want to go at it alone. What do you think?
I think it is indeed true that we've had a leadership that has not done the things they were supposed to do to build a sense of belonging. And if Biafra remains on the table, it is precisely because there is a lot of dissatisfaction with what has happened in the recent past. But it's also because there has been very effective mobilization to keep the idea of Biafra alive. Feelings of marginalization exist for objective reasons, but they also exist because they've been constructed. And what has happened is that at one plane you have the failure of construction of the nation, and on the other side, success in terms of building narratives to divide the nation. And I think the challenge in such situations is always to move towards narrative that bring people together. I think the fact that Nigeria has had competitive politics, there has been also politics of exclusion, is the core historical point being made. So what is the remedy for that?
Before we get to remedy, I'm always fascinated, Mr. Celestine, when Nigerians sit down and we talk about some of the sort of really critical issues that face us as a nation. Sometimes you would think that we are actually not talking about ourselves, as if these people, this leadership, are people who sort of are aliens that jump into our middle and make things happen. I mean, as someone who sort of represents a minority group, in fact, you're not considered, one of the 3 top tribes in Nigeria. What is your view regarding, first, the agitation for independence for Biafra, but perhaps, the wider agitation that we see among groups that feel marginalized within this country?
Well, I think that Nigeria has been very unfortunate to have leaderships that does not think about the people. Leadership that does not have any vision on where